Italian Mafia in the US. In the first half of the 20th century, there were only rumors about people in exquisite suits. Their lives and deeds remained far in the shadows until this man appeared. He managed to get so deep into the ranks of the Mafia that no one in the FBI was able to do this. And as it will turn out later, it will no longer be possible. Among the feds, he was known as Agent Joe Pistone, in Mafia circles, the thief Donnie Brasco. He played his role so masterfully that criminal organizations not only accepted him into their ranks, but also gained the trust of the closest circle of the clans. This is a story about a brilliant FBI officer who was able to bring the Mafia to its knees.
He was very tough. He saw no obstacles on his way. Pistone did his job so well that, while undercover, he managed to inform law enforcement officers about what was planned, when and what would happen.
Italian groups appeared in the United States with one goal: to expand their influence and become transnational criminal corporations. New York became the center and the most favorable city. The largest city in the US, where there are many opportunities. The Big Apple was divided among the 5 main families: Bonanno, Gambino, Colombo, Genovese, and Lucchese. Each of the families controls their territory in the city and outside it too. Together they are an Italian-American mafia. But such a gangster government was not always the case. To avoid clan wars and disputes over territory, a mafioso named Lucky Luciano created the so-called Commission, a meeting at which family disputes are resolved. No matter how the law enforcement officers tried to prevent the gangsters, at such meetings of the Commission, the Mafia came up with new plans. Each time, the cops' efforts were in vain. Everything had to be started from scratch. A person was needed to infiltrate the kitchen and leak data to the feds. This is exactly what Agent Joe Pistone has become. He was also chosen because he already had experience working undercover. In 1974, Pistone helped expose a gang of car thieves, becoming his own among strangers. The information he received became key to the detention of more than 30 members of the group and, as a result, the liquidation of the gang. All its leaders were thrown behind bars.
I had experience driving large trucks, which were used to transport stolen cars. They needed someone who could do it. The FBI then asked me if I would like to take part in an undercover operation. I agreed, slipped into the ranks of the group and worked with them for more than a year and a half.
The case with the mafiosi is a completely new level. If the car thieves could simply buy him with bribes if Joe was exposed, you can't play such games with gangsters. One wrong step and you can be left without a head. But Pistone grew up in the Italian district of New Jersey, so he was well acquainted with the traditions of the mafioso. In the spring of 1976, together with the FBI, he came up with a legend, false documents, and turned from an agent into a petty jewelry thief. And in order to really correspond to this profession, he went to special courses with his friend in jewelry stores. He taught him how to distinguish fakes from originals, how to properly sell supposedly stolen gemstones, and drilled into his mind the price list of almost every stone. All data about his true identity and family, wife and 3 children disappeared from Pistone's personal file.
In such a job you need a legend and you choose a name. I chose Donnie Brasco, and then you think about the profession. In my case, it is a jewel thief, because most of the time it does not require violence. There are not many thieves in American prisons who are in prison for murder. On the other hand, it is this profession that allows you to constantly be in contact, because you constantly communicate with different people and sell them jewelry.
It all started in the fall of 1976. Due to the fact that the operation took place simultaneously in 2 large cities, Miami and New York, it is sometimes called Sunny Apple. According to the plan, Donnie was supposed to gain the trust of the mobster within 6 months, and then the operation would be covered up. But no one knew that those 6 months would turn into a long 6 years. Brasco went to bars and pubs, which, according to the FBI, were often visited by US crime bosses. Glass after glass for almost 6 months, he still managed to attract attention. The first to contact Donnie were gangsters from the Colombo family. They tried to find ways to supply drugs to the United States from Sicily, which was a surprise to the FBI, because the Italian-American mafia in the 70s was reluctant to conduct a drug business, preferring casinos, clubs and gambling in general.
We've known that drugs are a dirty business. Selling them is like feeding your own child all these things. And you will be caught 100%.
He had to distance himself from the Colombo family's affairs because of their brutality. They mercilessly killed everyone who stood in their way. Donnie Brasco in this case was not just a witness. To prove that he was his own, he was also ordered to kill, which the FBI agents simply could not afford. He withdrew from their affairs and continued to search for other mafiosi. In 1977, he got the chance to meet the capo regime of the Bonanno family, the ruthless commander of the gang squads, Anthony Mirra. His reputation went far ahead of him. He was also involved in drug cases, but the main emphasis was on clubs and betting. After getting to know Brasco better, Mirra began to take him everywhere with him. This is how Joe Pistone's path to crime began.
The 70s are the times of discos. Gangsters were associated with clubs and parties. That was the world Anthony Mirra lived in, and Donnie Brasco entered. They went from one club to another. Mirra completely opened all the doors to the criminal world for Donnie.
Mirra was the ticket to obtaining information about Carmine Galante, the head of the Bonanno crime family. When the FBI found out that the agent had to gain the trust of the mafioso, he was tasked with sniffing out from the inside how the gangster leader lives, what his plans are, how he does business and how the mafia structure works. All these tasks, of course, were not easy, because Brasco was not a full-fledged member of the gang, but was only close to them. To join the ranks of the mafioso, you need to prove that you are your own. In the language of crime, it means to kill. But no one wanted to accept a newcomer into the family so quickly. He first had to prove his worthiness to pass all tests. Such petty tasks were nowhere near the name of Carmine Galante.
Carmine Galante is a crime boss and the head of the Bonanno family, known for his efforts to involve the Italian-American mafia in the heroin business. It is customary for gangsters to share profits, whatever they are, and Galante saw only personal benefit in selling drugs.
In order to finally secure the title of a reliable member of the mafia ranks, it was necessary to be useful, that is, to bring money. And Donnie succeeded, aka the jewel thief. Of course, he did not engage in real robberies. The cash was handed over to him by the FBI. The amounts are classified, so it is not known how much the feds spent in 6 years of undercover work. But you can guess that the money was quite big, given that Donnie was not kicked out of the gang, but rather began to trust him even more. This is how Brasco learned about the paramilitary hierarchical structure of mafia families. It turned out that the lowest ranks did not know who was in charge of them. Moreover, it turned out that it was impossible to accuse the head of the group of murders, because he was not personally involved, and no one was allowed to attend the commission meeting. The issue of arresting mafia bosses was key for the FBI. Although Joe Pistone could not help with this, he regularly provided the intelligence services with important data.
He informed us about the gangsters' businesses and rackets. He knew not only about the plans, but even who was going to be killed and why.
Meanwhile, it was 1979. Pistone hasn't seen his family for almost 3 years. He missed holidays, birthdays. Once every few months, the feds allowed him to talk to his family on a secure phone line. According to the legend, Donnie Brasco had no family, just a girlfriend, and a bad relationship with her. Therefore, he got along well with the families of ordinary mafiosi and their commanders. He was still working to gain their trust. And they believed him, thought that they were creating a new family for him. Pistone's acting was impeccable. On the one hand, he was a lone thief, and on the other, in the form of an evil gangster.
Once Tony and I were alone, and he often liked to say something offensive. I tell him, Tony, no one is around now, so listen. If you talk to me in such a tone, then you will have to walk looking around. I'll get you. He was shocked at first, but accepted it. The mafia loves tough nuts. Show weakness and they will swallow you.
Things were going well for Brasco, just like for the mobster. But in July 1979, everything went awry. Carmine Galante was killed, which meant that he had nothing to do in the ranks of the gangsters. The death of the boss could change the existence of the crime family. There is a rumor that Galante was ordered by other mafia families because of his desire to take all profits from the sale of drugs. And the sentence was carried out by his own bodyguards. The mobster was found dead with a cigar in his teeth. The news quickly spread not only to the criminal world. The whole of America talked about the murder.
Carmine Galante was murdered today in Brooklyn. Most likely, a gangster showdown. Galante is considered one of the most important crime bosses in our country.
It would seem that the undercover work for Joe Pistone is over. But in fact, a new page in his career as a mafioso is just beginning. In the struggle for the place of the head of the group, many people converged. However, the clear leaders were Anthony Mirror, whom we talked about earlier, and Dominic Napolitano, nicknamed Sonny Black. Later, it is this man who will bring Brasco to the Bonanno family, for which he will pay with his life. Sonny Black will consider Brasco his best friend. Together, they will do business and fight for the crowning place in the mafia world.
Sonny Black was a very important person in the Bonanno family, a capo who had 12 to 20 people in the gang under his command. 10 or 12 like Brasco, and 20 or 30 who performed trivial tasks to earn trust and possibly joined the mafia.
Everyone was gunning for Galante's spot. Even other mafia families tried to subjugate Bonanno's business and redistribute their territories. The FBI already knew this thanks to Joe Pistone. It remained to determine who would be the next leader and how he would manage the business. A powerful war was brewing, and Brasco was assigned a separate role in it.
Joe Pistone always came to us with information, talked about the connections between Sicilians and Americans. He talked about unreal drug deals, murders and other crimes.
At the end of 1979, the mobster commissioned Brasco to open a club in Florida. It was supposed to become a meeting center for other criminal groups. Quite a good achievement for an undercover FBI agent. Donnie Brasco carried almost all the operations in preparation for the opening. He was entrusted with money transfers, people management and contracts with service companies. It was a great chance to show the gangsters the loyalty. For the FBI, this was a chance to hook the mafioso. If the club manages to open, then the feds will have eyes in the very core of the Italian-American mafia.
The King's Court Bottle Club was to be used as a branch of the Bonanno family in Florida. This would expand the group's activities and provide refuge for mafia officials from persecution.
There was one problem. The territory of the states was divided between influential mafia families. And in order to go to one of them and start your own business there, you had to first agree and give as much percentage of the profit as the owners would ask. If not, you will have to clean up. If in New York Bonanno was in charge, then Florida was held by Santo Trafficante. The FBI had long sought to capture him, but couldn't. And so, in connection with the opening of the club, Dominic Napolitano went to negotiate the issue of price with Trafficante. The deal took place. The green light was given for the opening. Donnie Brasco's evidence suggests the Florida gang leader could be convicted for opening a mob club. This is what will happen. But with bribes, Trafficante will manage to avoid punishment. However, Pistone was able to turn this whole venture with the hands of Dominic Napolitano.
Napolitano was such a person that if you showed him what you were capable of, he was very attached and loyal. You could talk to him about everything. Alone, we discussed leaving the mafia, as there was nothing to do in its ranks, and moving away from criminal activities.
The club was opened in 1980. Dominic Napolitano, before demonstrating it to mafia bosses, personally came to make sure that things were going well. Everything was really going great. With video surveillance cameras in the paintings and listening devices in the walls, the club was launched. And while the mafiosi were having fun and discussing business issues, they were heard and seen by the FBI. Everything was included in the recordings: faces, phone numbers, drugs. It was a success.
There was a sign in the game room in which a hole was drilled for a camera. You have seen everything that is happening inside.
Meanwhile, the place of the murdered boss Carmine Galante was taken by Philip Rastelli. However, he led the group from a prison cell. And although the feds had information on him, they did not know that Rastelli had ordered the murder of 3 high-ranking mafia officials who planned to overthrow him. Brasco got this info as Dominic Napolitano often spoke of the triple murder. Nevertheless, it was not possible to prevent the liquidation. In 1981, the mafiosi dealt with 3 rebels, and law enforcement agencies did not want to get involved in criminal cases. They adhered to the principle that dogs gnaw themselves. Even the murder of the rebels did not stop the bloody mess within the mafia family. The Bonanno were preparing for a large-scale war for power, and Brasco was assigned a separate role. But for that, he had to be accepted into their ranks. Napolitano introduced him to the mafia boss, vouching for his several years of good service, his financial contributions, and his business acumen, suggesting he be made a member. The candidacy was approved. And this means that Donnie Brasco will receive a contract.
When Napolitano gave me a contract to kill, I had no choice. You have to accept it. It's a condition for joining the mafia. If you refuse, you become a target yourself. I was lucky, the man I had to clean up already knew he was finished and ran away. I still had to look for him.
Donnie bought himself time until the FBI came into play. It became apparent that undercover work had grown into Joe Pistone's real criminal career. He was removed from the task. And this despite the fact that Pistone himself did not want this. He understood that in order to continue working undercover, he had to kill. There is no other option, but he knew, if he escapes and disappears without a trace, then the mafiosi will announce a tidy sum for his head. He will no longer be able to live a normal life. The matter had to be finished. But the FBI decided otherwise. Donnie was recalled and sent to the other end of the US, away from the mobsters. Meanwhile, Sonny Black was in for a very unpleasant surprise.
We came to Napolitano's house. He greeted us. Sincerely or not is difficult to say. We explained to him that Joe Pistone was actually an FBI agent. And everything he knew, we know. We also explained to him that he was now in danger, because it was he who brought him into the family, and also introduced him to Trafficante.
Napolitano understood this very well. He had to run away and hide, but he did not hold a grudge against Joe Pistone. Napolitano considered him a good friend who helped him in one way or another. The information collected by Joe Pistone led to 200 indictments and more than 100 arrests of mafiosi, including not only ordinary soldiers, but also commanders and even advisors to bosses. However, they couldn't catch the big fish. They lay down at the bottom and began to hunt for those who brought Brasco into the family. One of the victims was Dominic Napolitano. His body was found dismembered in August 1981. The murder became a symbolic message to all gangsters.
Police found his body a year later. His hands were cut off. It's because with the same hands Sonny greeted the mafia bosses. Anthony Mira was also killed. He was shot in the head for introducing me to a mafioso.
For 6 years of undercover work, Donnie received a salary increase of $500. At that time this money could be used to pay for children's education. Operation Donnie Brasco ended in 1981. Joe Pistone was in hiding, always looking over his shoulder. But despite this, in 1986, when a new wave of trials swept through, he came to testify against the mafioso without hiding behind it. He exposed his name, place of residence and face. The FBI warned that this was very dangerous, but Joe repeatedly assured that his testimony could help put bad guys in prison. It didn't work out. Trafficante could not be thrown behind bars. However, Pistone is still alive to this day. And so far, no one knows why. Either the FBI was behind it, or he had some special arrangement with the mafia.